For most of history, China was a land of legend to the outside world, a mysterious empire at the other end of the Silk Road, guarded by the longest wall ever built. While ancient Rome, Greece, and Egypt crumbled into dust, China just kept going. It cycled through devastating wars, brilliant golden ages, and dozens of dynasties, each one leaving its mark on a quarter of humanity. How did one civilization manage to outlast every other ancient power and become the global titan it is today? The story begins not with a king or a conqueror, but with a catastrophic flood and a man who refused to fail. China's cradle was the Yellow River, a force of both life and destruction. For generations, its devastating floods washed away crops and villages, threatening to wipe out the fledgling civilization. Then came a brilliant engineer named Yu. Instead of just building bigger walls like those before him, Yu got smart. He dug a massive network of canals that redirected the angry river, channeling the floodwaters safely to the sea and creating a brilliant irrigation system. He didn't just save his people, he transformed their world. For this epic feat, he was made China's first ruler, kicking off the legendary Xia dynasty and a cycle that would define China for 4,000 years, the Mandate of Heaven. This was the core belief that the gods granted a just ruler the right to lead, but would mercilessly cast down any corrupt or foolish leader. This cycle turned when the Xia dynasty's final king became a cruel tyrant. A new power, the Shang, rose up armed with advanced bronze weapons and claimed the Mandate of Heaven for themselves. The Shang gave China its first written history, carving questions to the gods on oracle bones, which tell us an incredible amount about their daily life. They were a deeply religious and brutal society, known for burying slaves alive with their masters to serve them in the afterlife. But, like clockwork, the last Shang emperor descended into debauchery, and he too was overthrown by the Zhou dynasty, which would become the longest ruling dynasty in Chinese history. The Zhou era was a time of explosive innovation. They mastered iron, built grand canals, and pushed China's technology centuries ahead of the West. But their greatest legacy was an intellectual one. As the dynasty weakened, China entered the 100 Schools of Thought, a period of philosophical genius. Confucius argued for a society built on respect, order, and family values. Taoism urged people to find harmony by going with the flow of the universe. And a darker philosophy, legalism, claimed that people were naturally selfish and could only be controlled by an iron fist and absolute law. These three ideas would battle for China's soul for centuries to come. This philosophical battle played out in the bloody Warring States period, where 7 kingdoms fought for total domination. Out of this chaos rose one of the most ruthless and important figures in history, Qin Shi Huang. A master strategist and a follower of legalism, he crushed all his rivals one by one. In 221 BCE, he unified China for the first time, declaring himself its first emperor and creating the empire from which China gets its name. He was a brutal but effective ruler, standardizing currency, writing, and even the width of cart axles. He connected existing fortifications to begin the Great Wall and, obsessed with his own mortality, commissioned the incredible Terracotta Army, thousands of unique, life-sized clay soldiers to guard him in the afterlife. The Qin dynasty was so harsh it barely lasted 15 years, but it forged the template for all future dynasties. It was followed by the Han dynasty, which dialed back the cruelty and embraced Confucianism. The Han officially opened the Silk Road, creating a legendary trade route that connected China to the Roman Empire and beyond. They established the civil service exam system, ensuring that government officials were chosen for their skill, not just their bloodline, a system that would last until 1912. Centuries later, a new threat emerged from the northern steppes. Genghis Khan and his Mongol horde didn't just invade, they unleashed a storm of conquest that created the largest land empire in history. His grandson, Kublai Khan, finally conquered all of China in 1279, establishing the foreign-led Yuan dynasty. It was during this time that the Venetian merchant Marco Polo visited, returning to Europe with astonishing tales of a land with paper money, coal for fuel, and a civilization far more advanced than his own. But even the mighty Mongols couldn't hold China forever. After plagues, rebellion, and corruption weakened their rule, they were driven out by a peasant rebel who founded the Ming dynasty in 1368. The Ming represented a restoration of Han Chinese culture. They built Beijing's Forbidden City and completed the Great Wall we know today. However, they eventually fell into decline, and in 1644, another group of northern invaders, the Manchus, swept in to establish China's last imperial dynasty, the Qing. For a while, the Qing presided over an era of peace and prosperity. But by the 1800s, the world had changed. Industrialized Western powers, led by Great Britain, were hungry for Chinese goods like tea and silk, but had nothing the Chinese wanted in return, except for one thing: opium. When China tried to ban the devastating drug trade, Britain declared war, kicking off the century of humiliation. Outgunned and technologically overwhelmed, China suffered devastating defeats in the Opium Wars, forcing it to sign unequal treaties that ceded Hong Kong to the British and gave foreign powers immense control. Weakened and humiliated, the Qing dynasty finally collapsed in 1912, ending over 2,000 years of imperial rule. China descended into chaos, torn apart by regional warlords. Two rival factions emerged to pick up the pieces: the nationalists, led by Chiang Kai-shek, and the Communist Party, led by a charismatic revolutionary named Mao Zedong. They fought a bitter civil war, pausing only to unite against the brutal invasion of Japan during World War II. After the war ended, the fighting resumed, and in 1949, Mao's forces emerged victorious, establishing the People's Republic of China. Mao's rule transformed China, but at a terrible cost, with radical campaigns like the Great Leap Forward, causing a famine that killed tens of millions. After his death, his successor, Deng Xiaoping, took a different path, opening China's economy to the world. The result was the most explosive economic boom in human history, lifting hundreds of millions out of poverty and turning China into the manufacturing powerhouse we know today. From an ancient civilization born from a flood to a modern superpower shaping the 21st century, China's epic story of collapse and rebirth continues, proving it to be one of the most resilient and fascinating civilizations the world has ever known.